Greetings friends and welcome to the Fire Ability Collection. So friends, this one is very inspired by firebending, and if you're into Avatar, if you're into like the Human Torch, if you're into Rengoku-san, then this is definitely the guide for you. So friends, I'm going to be going over an explosive fireball combo, I'm going to go over a fire slash technique, I'm going to go over like a fire spin like ring technique, and also I'm going to do a fire flight, and it's going to be kind of jet propulsion that you can, there'll be two types of this. One of them will be gliding, so you'll just kind of, move forward in a straight line, and another one will be kind of like a flight, like you're jumping up in the air. So yes, friends, I hope you enjoy this, and let's get stuck in. Whoop whoop. Hey friends, so the first thing we're going to look at is the explosive fireball combo. So if you've checked out my fireball ability guide, you'll be pretty familiar with this, but what's cool about it is I'm going to show you how to do like a left-right combination kind of a thing. So here's our little animation. It's nothing too crazy. I've actually got two. I've got one with the left arm and then another one with the right arm. Sorry, this one's just a little bit more zoomed in. I've got one with the right arm as well. So together it'll go left, and then I want it to go right. So the first thing I'm going to do, friends, is actually set up the little combo mechanic, and it's not too complicated. We just need basically 3 pieces of logic aside from our timelines themselves. And just to go over the timelines quickly, over here I've got a no poses keyframe, and this one just deactivates the poses logic over here just so that it doesn't interfere. You still, however, you still have your procedural animation, because for example when I do this pose I want to still be able to run around and move while I do it. If you disable procedural animation, because this animation only affects the arms, your legs will be sort of staying still while you do your fireball and you'll still be moving. So at the moment we disable poses so it doesn't mess with the punch itself, but we keep procedural animation on so that they're still running and so on and so forth. Okay, sweet. So let's do the combo mechanic quickly. So we're going to go into logic and processing, so gadgets, logic and processing, and get ourselves a selector. We'll connect, we'll connect the first punch to A and the second punch to B. Okay friends, so now it's going to be so that when it's A it's doing our left punch, and when it's B it's doing our right punch. So let's just make our little box over here a little bit bigger. And if we want, we can actually put this in a little microchip all its own. So we can go cha-cha-chang, grab all this business and put it here so that we can sort of be working together with everything. Okay, sweet. So now what we're going to want to do is go into logic and processing again, go to the left and get ourselves a counter. Now we're going to make it so that when I press square, so we'll go into our controller sensor, get the square button. When we press square it's going to increase the count. When the count is full it's going to go to move to next port. But not only that, it's also going to power the selector. The reason that I make it power the selector is because if the selector is on, it will automatically go to the A port. So it's important that we make it so that when we press square it switches the position, or it switches which output is there, but it's also going to power it for as long as that sort of goes on. So at the moment I press square, this is powered on, and it'll take us to one of these ports. But we don't want it to just stay there, we want it to be able to switch every time. But of course if we press square once, the counter is going to be full, and if we press it again, nothing's going to happen. So the way that we get to reset our counter is with a timer. In some of my other counter, or rather combo videos, you might have seen that timelines are sort of related to, you would take it on end trigger and then reset it over here like that. So when you complete the animation you can then combo into the next one. However, I prefer to use a timer for this one because you want to be able to do your next punch before the second one is completely done. So for example, when you're in this stage, you're kind of like, you do your punch, and at the moment now you're on your backswing, and I want to be able to do it so that when you're on your backswing you can actually start the next punch and create like a nice combo vibe. So just to sort of demonstrate, if I go here and I have on end trigger, and I do it for both of these. Make sure also that you set the playback mode of both of these to once. By default they'll be on sustain. So set them both to once, and now let's see what happens. So I press square, and as you can see, it's cool, it's working, it's comboing, but when I press square and I keep sort of tapping it, they'll go back to their resting position before they begin their next punch, which isn't exactly what we want. So we're going to delete these connections here. What we want is for them to actually be doing it sort of before their previous move is actually ended, so it combos quite nicely. So we're going to make it so that our timer is started when the counter is full, and then after a certain amount of time it's going to reset the count. But what amount of time should we use? Well, what we should do is we should look at our particular animation, and we should say, okay, cool, at this point he's punching at 0.43, so 43 split seconds, and now he sort of starts to be on the backswing, so you can kind of make it pretty much any time after this, because it's kind of just a bit of a long keyframe. You can make it about, let's say, 0.5. So after 0.5 seconds it will reset and you can start your next punch. And we'll go finish, timer finished pulse, and connect it to reset count. So it looks a little bit funky, there's quite a few wires going all over the place. But essentially we press square, the counter is full. When the counter is full, it goes to the next port and it turns on the selector. When the selector is turned on, it's going to go from port A or B, depending on whether the move to next output has been powered by the counter itself. At the same time, the counter is going to increase the count, or sorry, start the timer. The timer will tick down from 0.5 seconds and then reset it. Then we can combo very nicely. So now I can be pressing it, and as you can see, the combo is going a lot smoother now, and it's like as the one arm is coming back, the next one is actually beginning the punch. And I can run around and do it as well. Cha cha cha. So we've got a nice little punches going on there. Nice little punch combo. And that's looking cool, friends, but let's add the fire part. The combo part is done. Let's get to the fire. Okay, friends, so now to make our explosive fireball, I'm going to go into sculpt mode, and I'm going to go curve. Then I'm going to go L1 and square. I'm going to sort of stretch it out, grab the arrows, make this one a little bit smaller. And now we have a pretty good little fireball there. You can also put on a quick grid snap if you want to have it nice and sort of straight. If you see the little lines there that sometimes come up, don't worry about that for now. What we're going to do is we're actually going to go into Tools, Sculpture Detail, and reduce the detail of it. And now you can't see those lines very well. But we're also going to go into our modes, Style, and then we're going to go Fleck Type, and we're going to put it on this one, Baroque, on the right. We're going to apply it to this. You can't really see it at the minute, but now we're going to go also in Style. We're going to go Tools, Looseness, and we're going to increase the looseness of this so it becomes a little bit more sort of rough and detailed. Then we're going to go L1 and X while we're in our little sculpt. Then we're going to go Colors, get ourselves a mix of reds. Tools, Spray Paint, Shapes, Sphere, L1 and Square, Soft Blend, and now we're going to pretty much just paint it and give it a bit of color. So I'm going to give it a bit of red to start off with. There's just a bit of, I'm using that mix of reds so that there's just a bit of variation in the red. But of course the fire is not going to be purely red, it's also going to be a bit of orange, I think. So we choose that mix of oranges. Bit of orange there. And of course a bit of yellow. A few little yellow accents along the way. And if you feel like it's a little bit of the red is lost, you can of course come back with a bit of that red again. Okay, sweet. Now at the moment it's looking a little bit washed out. The colors aren't particularly vibrant, but if we go glow, we now have like a proper looking little fire. At the moment it looks like just a fire that's frozen in time. In order to make it look like it's moving, we're going to go to Effects. It's got the little stars over there, and we're going to go Flow. And now we're getting the impression of the fire like kind of moving. You know what I mean? You can also do other things like wave, for example, which often makes it a little bit more like explosive-y looking. Evaporate is also a nice one, but it depends on the size of the fleck, of course. You might want to reduce the size, or you might want to reduce the looseness, and that will change the effect of, or it'll change the sort of how much the effect affects it. Just a bit of a tongue twist. But yes, however much it sort of looks, and pretty much, friends, you just mess around with that until you find something that you quite enjoy. So at the moment, this is kind of just like a little bit of a fireball, so that we're going to blast this one off into the distance. Okay, friends, so now we have our fireball, we have our combos, but how do we make it explode? Well, first we're going to make ourselves an explosion. So we're going to go modes, paint mode, then we're going to go Baroque, get ourselves a particular color. I reckon we'll go for a mix of reds, and we'll also put in some orange and yellow and stuff. But for the time being, we're going to go into guides, make sure that surface snap is on, and then let's make some explosions. You might also want to go to tools and go draw flex rather than brush flex. The difference is, with brush flex, if you let go of R2, it makes them less visible, so it makes them more translucent. In other words, it reduces their opacity. With draw flex, however, when R2 is fully pressed down, the stroke is big, and as you let go of R2, it makes it a little bit smaller. So we're going to go with draw flex so that we can have a bit of that vibe. Okay, sweet. So I'm going to start big, and then it's going to get a little bit smaller. Cha-ching. Then I'm going to go with orange, a mix of orange colors. Start big and get a little bit smaller. Then I'm going to go with yellow, a mix of yellows. Start big and get a little bit smaller. Okay, sweet. You can also sort of adjust the position of these as you desire. Now I'm going to go L1 and square on this. I'm going to increase the glow. So those are looking like nice colors for a little fire explosion. But now we need to actually make it look like an explosion. So we're going to go to duplicates, rotational duplicates, and go around cylinder. Or actually, let's go in all directions. Now, if we go playback speed in animation with the film clapper, we're going to increase the percentage, in other words, the speed that these paintings move. But we're going to go loop and turn that off, so it'll go. So that's looking pretty cool. It's moving maybe a little bit slow for an explosion. So we'll increase the speed to 1300%. So that's looking pretty cool. We can speed it up even more maybe. And yeah, friends, now you can also pretty much just mess around with it. If you feel like it looks a little bit too clean, you can turn surface snap off. You can maybe get yourself another mix of reds, and you can add like maybe a bit of a squiggle here. And that'll sort of manifest in different ways. Well, it didn't manifest very clearly here actually. But let me show you like this. If you just kind of add in a few like, you'll get sort of that sort of a vibe. If you feel that things are a little bit too long, what you can do is you can go pulse, and then you'll get a slightly different vibe. You can increase the trail length. Basically what pulse does is it just makes it so that things kind of, when the trail length is very long, then you'll sort of see multiple strokes simultaneously. If the trail length is very short, you'll kind of see like individual strokes, like almost one at a time. But if you keep it quite high, it's quite nice. You might also want to have time offset, so that the explosion kind of happens, not every stroke is simultaneously sort of going out, but it's kind of going out in a bit of a pattern, one after each other. It's like a very slow delay sort of a thing. I'll move these a little bit closer because they're a little bit far away. That sort of a thing. Boom. So that's looking pretty cool, friends. I think that's a pretty cool explosion at the moment. And pretty much if we look at it, it's just a collection of some different colors and then a few squiggles to get you a nice sort of explosion effect. And that is currently looking pretty sweet, friends, if you ask me. So now, how do we stick these together? How do we stick our fireball and our explosion together and make them work? Well, what you're going to want to do is go to your gadgets, logic and processing, get yourself a microchip, then L1 and X to attach it to your little fireball. go into your microchip, and you're going to go then to your gadgets once again, sensors and input, impact sensor, it looks like the little ball ricocheting. Then you're going to, so it's basically when it impacts with something, something is going to happen. What is going to happen? It is going to emit, so we'll go moves and output, emitter. We'll go when it bumps something, in other words, you know, when it makes contact with something, it is going to emit something. Now, when we get into our emitter, we're going to go emit speed 0, emit mode once. Then we're going to choose our little explosion over here. Now, you might not be able to see what's actually going on with your emitter, so in order to help with that, you'll go show and hide and turn off preview invisibility. And now you can sort of align it with your fireball, kind of make it sort of so that the fireball is in the center, so that when it hits something, it's going to have a nice cool explosion like that. Also, because I had the little explosion down on the ground, you couldn't see it in its sort of full glory. But yes, so now when it impacts with something, it's going to make an explosion, but it's also going to simultaneously be destroyed. Because when the fireball hits something, it's going to be destroyed, but it's also going to emit this cool explosion. So now, if we want to demonstrate that, what we will do is make it so that we emit this, and then we'll see if it actually explodes when it hits something. So how do we stick this all together? Well, first of all, we're going to go to our, let's go to our left punch, and we're going to look for our keyframe where our character is going to be punching out that fireball in particular. So we'll look and we'll see, okay, sweet, it's this keyframe. So we'll go into logic, we'll go into gadgets, then we'll go moves and output, get ourselves an emitter. And this emitter is going to emit our little fireball over here. We're going to want to line it up so that it kind of looks like it comes out of their hand, which looks pretty cool. Then we're going to turn on a quick grid snap and make it so that this little arrow that we've got is pointing forwards, so that the fireball goes outwards. Woohoo! Okay, sweet. So when we do this, wow, it's going to shoot out a little fireball. So let's have a quick check, friends, and see how this looks, but there's going to be a problem. Wow. Yeah, so there we are. So we've got our fireball, but as you can see, it kind of just falls. And this was the problem I was telling you guys about. So in other words, the way that we want to fix this is we'll go into our fireball, and we'll go into physical properties, and we'll make it ignore gravity. So now when we do our punch, the fireball is going to move forward like that, which is looking pretty cool, friends. And we saw that it exploded with the floor, but let's make ourselves a quick wall so that we can actually, you know, hit something. So I'm just going to copy the floor that we've got over here and just do a bit of a rotation. So now, so that's looking pretty cool. Now pretty much all there is to do is to link it up with our other ability as well. So I'm just going to copy this emitter, go into our right punch, line it up with this timeline, just like that one. Oh, but one thing I didn't change was where the fireball came from. So you'll see, whoopsie, you'll see that the fireball is going to, we'll click on the emitter, or sorry, we'll click on the keyframe. Then we're going to line up the fireball with their hand. You'll of course want to turn off the grid snap quickly. So now we are emitting the second fireball, and it's coming from their right hand rather than their left. So now we go right, left, gish, gish, gish. So that's looking pretty cool, friends. I think if we want to really sort of drive that feeling home, we might want to add like a bit of an explosion sound effect. So what you might do for that, friends, is go into your, look at your explosion over here, and we're going to add a little sound to that. And the way we do that is we're going to go search, we're going to go sound effects, we're going to go dramatic effects, then we're going to go explosions, Then we're going to get ourselves the... Let me just try and find it here. We've got quite a few. So many options. There's actually a lot of dang options, man. I'll tell you what. We'll go to magic. And then I think there's a fireball. There we go. Explosive fireball. Now we're going to surface snap it with L1 and X onto the explosion paint stroke over here. And you say, mate, why are we doing this? Well, because when this gets emitted, this particular paint stroke, it's then going to be emitted with the explosive fireball sound effect attached. You can increase the volume and stuff over there. You can also make it so that it has 3D panning, so that you'll only really hear it if you're like close to the explosion. So if we do it from far away, for example, we can hear it, but it's a little bit soft. Whereas if we go close, we can hear it a lot louder. So there you are, friends. That is how you do a little bit of a fireball. Shoo, shoo. So here you have an explosive fireball combo, friends. Alrighty. Okay, friends, so now we're going to do a fire slash ability, and this one is going to be used with a kick, and it's going to have the character do a nice little kick, and then the flames will sort of start small, they'll grow larger, they'll travel forward, and then they'll sort of dissipate in like a bit of a crescent shape. So as you can see, I've got my animation looping here. They're going to sort of have a little bit of a backswing of the leg, and then it's going to go schwang, and then the little arc of flame is going to move forward and then dissipate. So the way that we're going to do this one, friends, is we're actually going to use paint strokes. So we're going to go mode, paint mode, and we're going to use the old frame by frame animation for this one. So for flex, I'm going to choose Baroque. Then for colors, I'm going to choose reds. Now, first, this is going to be the first frame of our little flame slash, so it's going to be kind of small. It's going to be like, as the flames are beginning, there's kind of just a bit of flames starting over here, nothing too hectic. Add a little bit of red, add a little bit of orange, and definitely add some yellow there, because that'll give us some sort of definition. So it sort of begins, then we go to the second frame, we go back to our reds, and we start to create like a little bit more intensity. It starts to like curve around, become a little bit more intense. You can add some more orange there. This is like a bit of an artistic one. Add a bit of yellow, of course, as well. Make sure you don't lose that good red though. Okay, cool. Then we go to the next frame. And yes, friends, so we kind of continue in this pattern as we go. You can make the red a little bit stronger by pressing hard on the old R2 button. So that's looking pretty cool. Add a little bit of orange. You might want to use surface snap for this, friends, but you don't have to. But surface snap might make it just so that things are a little bit easier, a little bit more on the same line. But it's totally up to you. If you don't use surface snap, it'll just have a bit more of a 3D effect. But either way, we'll create sort of a bit of a means for that in any case. So let's get a little bit more red there. Then let's go to the next frame. Let's get even more red going there. Okay, sweet. We've got a bit of orange here again. And once again, this doesn't have to be perfect. I'm being very artistic here. We're just creating our little frames. And then, let's say by the 5th frame, or whatever you have, let's have our crest sort of in earnest. Don't worry if it's not aligning perfectly with your character at the minute. That's fine. But let's say once we get to a certain point, we're gonna have like a nice arc of flame. That's looking pretty cool. Then we'll go to our next frame again. Let's aim for 10 frames, friends. So this one, you can make it similar. So instead of making it dissipate or grow larger, we'll kind of have it at like a bit of a similar shape. So just use that onion skin that you've got where you can see the previous frame and create like a similar looking flame. Add in a bit of that orange, add in a bit of that yellow. Alrighty. That's looking good. Almost there, friends. Back to the red color. So we'll have 3 frames where it's like looking like nice and big. That arc is like very strong, very prominent as it moves forward. And then in the last few frames, which are going to be 8, 9, and 10, we are going to have it sort of start to dissipate. So now we're moving on to 8. So this one can look a little bit smaller. It kind of moves to the opposite side, the sort of weight of the painting, if you know what I mean. It's like a bit thicker on the side, a little bit looser on this side, a little bit lighter, not as thick the strokes, a little bit orange, a little bit of the yellows. Then we will go to our next one. Almost done, friends. And now it's kind of like the weight is almost entirely on the right side now as the slash begins to sort of dissipate. You don't have to use too much color now. Maybe just one or two strokes of the yellow and the orange. And just make sure that red still comes through. And then we will go to frame 10. And it'll be kind of just... Maybe I'll go back there. Just the kind of... the suggestion. So by this point, and you can leave it as just red, or you can add just like the tiniest stroke of orange and like maybe the tiniest stroke of yellow. Okay, sweet friends. So now let us go to frame by frame, that section of the painting, and we'll go back. So at the moment, it's going to look like this. So that's looking pretty cool, but we'll want it to be a little bit faster. That's not bad. If you go to 15, then it's basically each frame is it's basically, so this is the speed, this is the max speed, and it's basically like one frame here is equal to like one real-time frame. So that means it looks really quick. If you reduce the speed to 13, it's a little bit slower, but it gives it a cool kind of animation look to it. So I would say maybe go for the 13 or 14 range. I think that'll look pretty cool, friends. If you want it to last longer, all you'll have to do is create more frames. So you'll have to do more of those paintings. Let's increase the glow, a little bit of the brightness there. And if you feel that your flame is cool, but it's just a little bit... it's a little bit kind of piddly, it's a little bit thin, if you know what I mean, then that's cool. We can go positional duplicates and say inside sphere, and at the moment you might be saying like, oh, what's going on here? But if you reduce the spread, you can increase the amount of copies while still having them like pretty close together. Of course, if you increase the spread a lot, they'll be spread out super far. But if you reduce the spread, they'll be nicely together. You can also do a few things like impasto to make it a little bit more 3D. You can also make it a little bit like ruffled, so that the flames look a little bit more rough and ready. And if there's a little bit too much yellow, a little bit too much brightness, you can reduce the glow so that those reds kind of come through again. And yeah, that's looking pretty cool, friends. I think maybe the ruffle is a little bit too high. And I'll maybe reduce the impasto just a bit. And then we've got a pretty cool fire slash there, my friends. I think I'm going to go quickly back to frame by frame animation. I just want to see what the different things look like here. You know what, friends? Actually, I'm going to go with 11 frames. So I'm going to go to my painting, I'm going to go to frame by frame, and I'm going to go to number 10. Then I'm going to add one more, just so that we have a little bit more of the old 9, 10. and I'm just gonna have like a little bit of just the merest suggestion. So what you might do as well, friends, is kind of just as this goes through, it could kind of become like less opaque over time. But of course, that's totally up to you. I think that's looking pretty cool at this stage. We've spent quite a while on the frame by frame part. So I think what we'll do now is we'll get this thing to emit and work with our ability. So let's look at our little timeline, and as we go, yeah, this is kind of where the kick starts. So I think we'll have it emit from around here, and we can sort of adjust that. But I'm going to go emit speed and leave that at 6 for now. Then I'll go emit mode once, and I shall emit our little flame over here. But I'm going to line it up so that it's kind of a bit central to our character. And if it's a bit big, you can also reduce the size, and we'll do it about so. That should be cool. You can also adjust the angle of it, so it's kind of like a this sort of a thing. But you can of course also do it flat. It's totally up to you. So at the minute that's looking pretty cool. I reckon we give this a try. Let us have a squiz. So at the moment, I didn't change the direction of the emitter, which was silly of me. We want this to go forward, away from our character. So I'm going to zoom out quickly, or just with the left analog, you know. And I'm going to go guides, grid snap, and point it forwards. Now let's have a try. Shwa. So at the moment, that's looking cool, but our slash kind of loops again and again, which isn't exactly what we want. What we rather want is for it to just go once. So we're going to go frame by frame, and then animation type, at the moment it's on loop. We're going to set it to play once. Okay, sweet friends. So I'm just going to turn off preview invisibility so we don't see all that other extra stuff. And now let's go. Whoosh. Oh! I'm not sure what's cracking. I'm not sure what's cracking there, friends. Yes. So the problem is, the reason why it was doing that is because if I go frame by frame, it starts on frame 11, which isn't what we want. We must set it back to frame 1, and then it will play it once from there. So we go. Whoosh. And I think we'll also make it so that when it gets to 11, it stops. So what we'll do is we'll quickly go preview invisibility. We'll look at our little flame over here, and we might just attach a bit of a microchip. So I'm going to go microchip, and I'm going to try and, or maybe turn off this grid snap first, because it's getting a little bit in the way. So we'll go gadgets, logic and processing, and give us a bit of a microchip. Surface snap it onto the flames there, and then we're going to make it so that, let's say after, or actually we don't need that. What we'll do is we'll add in a little timeline, and on this timeline we're going to put down a keyframe, just an empty keyframe, and then another keyframe after a very short time, and it is going to reduce the opacity of it, the opacity here, in other words the visibility. It's going to reduce it to 0. We'll increase it here. So it's kind of like over the time that this is, while it is kind of alive, once it's been emitted, it's going to reduce its in opacity. It's going to become less visible, and then it will be deleted. So we'll go to move as an output and get a destroyer. So we go wah. Now we might not want to have it becoming invisible as it spawns, so we'll maybe make this a little bit longer, and then it'll kind of fade out as it gets towards the end there. So now it's going to be visible, visible, visible. It'll start to become transparent. It'll disappear, and then it will be destroyed. So let's see what happens now. Zoosh. So that's looking pretty cool, friends. Hacha, hacha, hacha. If you ask me, it's a little bit far away from our character, so I might just go into our timeline here, and where it emits, I might just move it backwards a smidge, and maybe even reduce the size of it a bit. So let's have a squiz now. Zoosh, zoosh. So that's looking pretty cool. So now we have a bit of a fire slash, friends. You can also, I think, what I might do is adjust it so that it's kind of mimicking the angle of the kick as well. So if we go, that's looking pretty cool. But yeah, I think I'm going to move it back even more, just so that we get that impression of it being kind of right nearby us as a result of our kick. Okay, cool, friends, that's looking pretty cool. So this uses quite a few paint strokes, and the technique is that we use frame by frame animation. And now we have a pretty sweet flame slash flame kick technique. That's looking pretty sweet, friends. All that we have in it is our little animation. We have our little keyframe that disables procedural animation as well as the poses, just so that it doesn't mess with our animation itself. Then we have our emitter, and I think I'm going to connect this to, let's say, triangle. So now we've seen it in action from the logic perspective, but we're going to go timeline. We're also going to set the playback mode to once. And now if I jump in and use it, let's see what happens. So I'm going to press triangle, and we have a nice sort of like slash kick over there, friends, which is looking very cool. So at the moment you can see it kind of like our procedural animation is sort of halted as when we do it. So if you want to make it that your character kind of stops moving when they do their kick, which we can definitely do, what you can do is, I mean, one of the things you can do is just make it so that procedural animation still works. So I'll show you what that looks like. We'll go to procedural animation, and we'll make it so that procedural animation still works, but just bear in mind it's going to look a bit funny. So if we go, you can see like the character kind of does like a bit of a step, which isn't terrible, friends, because they are kind of still walking, but they'll kind of just be walking on one leg. So that depends which you prefer. The second option that we could have is, so we'll just make it so that procedural animation is deactivated again. So if we go into our characters, procedural animation, we'll see these are all deactivated. One thing that you can do is make it so that this prevents us from moving. So what you can do is you can just go to your character and set the move speed and all this sort of business to 0. And then they'll go, okay, sweet, yeah. So as they move, they can move, but when they kick, they will stand in place and they will do their kick. So it depends what you prefer, friends. You can have the procedural animation still working, and then you'll sort of do a bit of a hop on one leg. Or you can make it so that your character stops moving when they do the kick. So it's totally up to you, friends, whichever you prefer. I'm going to go with the latter, but I think the former is cool as well. So there you are, friends. That is the flame slash kick. Hey friends, so now I'm going to show you the fire ring slash fire spin. Now this one is kind of based on the Zuko versus Azula fight, where he does the kind of like breakdance like leg spin, and then there's like this epic ring of fire that comes out. So to begin with, I've kind of just got my animation, which is kind of based on the thing that Zuko does when he does his nice spin. And then of course I've got the no procedural slash no pose keyframe over here, which just makes sure it doesn't interfere with our animation itself. So that's done, and I'll trust you guys to make your own animations. But I'm going to show you how to do the cool fire effect, and we're going to use paint strokes. So you're going to go into modes, paint mode, and you're going to turn on surface snap. Then you're going to go colors, and you're going to choose red, but you're going to choose the sort of multicolor red. This one over here that changes colors. Fleck type, you're going to go all the way over to the right and go Baroque. Now what you're going to want to do is create sort of like a bit of like a curvy line, sort of like this. But you'll also want to go kind of slowly so that you can get a variation in color. It doesn't have to be too perfect. I might do that again just so that the curve is less intense. It's just kind of like a slight curve, and as you can see, there's different color reds in there. Now if you increase the brightness, you'll see that there's a bit of like variation in the color of the red, which is cool. But we're not done just yet. We're going to go L1 and square on the paint stroke. Then you're going to go duplicates around cylinder, and at the moment of course it's not quite right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go scope into it, and we're going to now rotate it like this, and now we have a ring that's a lot more sort of believable. It's still like got a little bit of like loose edges and stuff here and there, so that's chilled. You can just sort of rotate it as you like. You might want to turn off surface snap now, because otherwise it'll of course shoot to whatever surface is nearby. Try that, and then it'll be a little bit flatter. And of course you can increase the amount of clones you have so that it's like a little bit more thick and that sort of a thing. But we're also still not done yet. We're also going to go and get ourselves an orange, a multicolor orange, and we're going to do a similar thing. So we're going to do sort of, okay, cool. You can sort of mimic the sort of similar shape. It doesn't matter if it's not like perfectly straight or whatever. But here we are. At the moment it doesn't look like much, but if you increase the brightness, you'll see the colors are looking pretty sweet over there. And if that's all you need, friends, that's cool. But I also kind of like to add a bit of a yellow to it as well. If you're doing like a Zula styles, then of course you could make a little bit of blue flame, which is cool. Cha-cha-ching. And now you'll have something pretty crazy. If you feel like it's a little bit too yellow, you can of course reduce the brightness a bit, or you can, you know, copy the red and sort of place the red there as well, so that there's a little bit more red sort of overall. So at the moment this is looking pretty cool in terms of color, and of course all we've used is kind of like these little curves over here. But now what we're going to want to do is get them to look like fire. So you're going to go into animation in the painting menu. It's a little like film clapper over there. You're going to increase the speed so that it looks like it's, you know, really moving. Then you're going to go into effects and you're going to go wave 100% and evaporate about like 70 or so percent. It really depends on you. If you feel like it's a little bit too big, you can of course reduce these to whatever you prefer. But I find that gives a really good impression of fire, in my personal opinion. I think it looks pretty legit. And of course it's looking a little bit dim, so you might want to increase the color a bit. And now we've got like some pretty legit looking flames there, friends. I'm not sure how you feel, but that looks pretty legit to me. Okay, sweet friends, so now we have our fire, which is looking really cool, and we have our dude just dancing in the corner, which is great. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go and put a grid snap on. Then we're going to go R2 on our little flame and press triangle so that it's aligned to the grid. It might already be, but if not, it'll sort of, like if I'm like, oh, and I go align to grid, then it'll put us in a nice position there. Then I'm going to go into sculpt mode quickly and just put a little sculpt sort of like in the center of our little flame. Then I'm going to grab our flame and I'm going to scope into it so that these are kind of in the same group, and so that this cube is kind of like nicely sort of central in this position. So we get ourselves a nice sculpt and we put it in the center of our little fire ring, and we make these part of the same group by grabbing the fire with R2 and scoping into it with L1 and X, and now they are the same group. Sweet. So now we're going to go into this cube. I'm going to put down a little not a timeline, or not a keyframe, but a timeline. Then we're going to go into this timeline. Doo-doo-doo. And we're going to go, okay, sweet. We're going to turn off the grid snap. Not that we need to with a new update, boop boop. But we're going to go, okay, sweet, sweet. Now we're going to go in here, and we're going to go animate, keyframe, and put that one over there. That's just an empty keyframe, as we can see. Then I'm going to put down another one, at let's say like the 2-second mark or whatever, and I'm going to grab the flame. I'm going to go L1 and X to go into this group, R2, and I'm going to increase the size of the flame, but try and keep it so that that little cube is still in the middle, and this will give the impression of the flames growing. So that looks pretty cool, while still being sort of in the middle. We're not going to do this to the entire group, including the square, because otherwise, or including the cube, because what will happen then is it'll actually record the position of the group and it'll sort of move to this position over here. So that's not what we want. We want to be like this and go bzzz, and the flames will increase. And if we have play mode on, it's going to give that nice spinning effect, which is so cool. We can also increase the size of this keyframe so that it's like a second long. And I'm going to name this keyframe size, because we know that's what it's changing. What is the keyframe changing? It's changing the size of the flame. And now the next thing to do is make it so that our flames will actually like dissipate when they get to when they approach their sort of maximum size. So we're going to put down an empty keyframe. Then we're going to get a new keyframe and put it just before it gets to its maximum size. So just before this keyframe is reached. I'm going to go L1 and square. sorry, we're going to go L1 and X so that we get into the group. Then L1 and square on our flames, which are looking very furry at the moment. And then we're going to go opacity and set that to 0%. So this is going to make it look like the flames sort of fade out as they grow. So we've got it like this. So we've got the two keyframes. This one is the size sort of one, and this one is the opacity. So now if we have a look at it, it goes, it sort of spreads out, and then it kind of fades into nothingness, which is pretty cool. My only problem with it at the moment is that it's a little bit slow, so I might halve the time and make it, okay, cool, it'll be done in 1 second rather than 2, and it'll go, which looks pretty cool. Maybe adjust this. I make it so that the opacity is before this keyframe rather than after, because if I put it after, the fire will kind of come to a stop and then it will dissipate. So we want it to be kind of dissipating while it's still growing. The next thing to do is just name this keyframe opacity so that we know what everything does, because you don't want to have a whole bunch of unnamed keyframes and you don't know what's cracking. So this one changes the size, this one changes the opacity. And together they give us a pretty sweet dissipating and growing flame effect, which I think is just really rad. Okay, sweet. Now how do we add our sweet flame and also work it together with our character's dope spin kick? Swish swing. Well, it's going to work like this, friends. So we are going to begin by grabbing ourselves an emitter, and we're going to line it up with, if I watch my animation, let me just bring it down over here. If I watch my animation, I'm going to make it so that it's when he does his like swish swing, his kind of like scissor kick thing over here. Wah, because then he sort of spins around and gets back into his normal position. Spin, sweet. So I think where this emitter is at the moment, cha-cha, that looks pretty cool. So this emitter, I'm going to set the emit speed to 0 and the emit mode to once. Then I'm going to go object to emit, and of course I'm going to choose my flaming ring. My flaming ring, which could not possibly be interpreted in any other way. Grab your flaming rings, friends, and place them in the position most fortunate. Okay, sweet, so it's going to go washa, and at this point it's going to shoot it out. That's looking cool. So now let's make this a usable technique. I'm going to go quickly and make its playback mode set to once. I had it on loop because I was just demonstrating it. So I'm going to go sweet, playback mode set to once. Then I'm going to connect it to a button press. Let's make it R1, because why not? And now when I do it, it's going to be spin. Now that's looking cool, except for the freaking cube that's there. Also, did you see that the cube sort of stayed behind at the end? So one step we've left out is that we should actually put a destroyer in here, so that once it's actually sort of done its size and opacity and stuff, then it's going to disappear. And of course we're going to go to our little cube, we're going to turn off visibility, we're going to turn off collidable, and then it's not going to interfere with us anymore, and we'll just have a sweet firing. So that's looking pretty cool, friends. As we do our spin, it creates like a nice firing. You might want to make it like a little bit smaller if you feel like it doesn't quite start at your body like enough, which is totally cool. You might want to then change the size to make it even bigger or whatever it might be. But if, for example, you wanted it to be a bit smaller, if you feel like it starts like a little bit too big, you could always just do it like this. Swish swing. Make it a little bit like this. And now when you do your move, that's kind of a little bit too small if you ask me, but it's really up to you, friends. If you want to make it start smaller, you can just reduce the size here, but you'll increase the size when you do it over here. So here we are, we'll go at this stage. We've got like a cool fire spin. And yeah, that's looking pretty sweet to me, friends. I'm not sure what you guys think, if you're enjoying that, but I'm thinking it's looking pretty cool. Whoop whoop. Hey friends, next up is the fire flight or fire propulsion. So this is kind of based on how Ozai flies around in his fight against Aang, where the fire comes out of his hands and then he's flying around and having a great time. That is the inspiration for this kind of movement. So let's get stuck in, friends. First, I'm going to design just the little flames that are going to be coming out of your hands. You can also make them come out of your feet, but I think I'll just make it simple for now and just do hands. So we're going to go into sculpt mode and choose ourselves a cone. Then I'm going to go guides, grid snap, make it so that pointy end is pointing downwards, and kind of just make it kind of long, so it's kind of like a bit of an ice cream cone. Then you can just stamp that down. Then I'm going to go into it, tools, spray paint, get myself a nice mix of reds. Going to change to sphere, L1 and square, give us a bit of a soft blend. Press square again, turn off that grid snap now, and I'm just going to give it a bit of a paint, so that there's a bit of color on it, a bit of variation in color, you know. Then I'm going to give us a bit of orange. This is going to be a common sort of strat throughout the video for the old fire, the look of the fire, and then go and do a little bit more red again at the end, just so that the red isn't too lost. Okay, then we can increase the brightness of that, so that's looking pretty cool. And then we're going to L1 and square on that little piece there, on that little sculpt. We're going to increase the looseness. We're going to make it flow, and we're going to make it flow pretty fast. Maybe have a bit of wave as well, because we want this to be, you know, like jet propulsion kind of a vibe, you know. You can also increase the size of the looseness, or increase the looseness percentage, I should say. Okay, but we just need to change the fleck and also the direction. So for that we're going to go into modes, style mode. We're going to choose our Baroque fleck, which is that classic fiery looking one. And then we're going to go comb and make it so that it points downwards. So that is just a bit of a useful trick, so that the flow effect in particular is, you know, pointing in the right direction. You can also adjust the amount of looseness you want. It sort of changes the look quite drastically depending on how loose it is, so definitely something to check out. You can also check out fleck perspective, which is a bit of a similar vibe. You can mess with impasto, make it a little bit chunkier, and ruffle. You can use ruffle, it kind of makes it look a bit messier. And there you've got a bit of a nice flame going on there, friends. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to make this pretty small, and then we're going to like attach it to our character's hands. So we're going to scope into the hand section of the puppet so that everything else is sort of blurry, and you're going to attach it to their hands. So you scope into the hand as I've done now, and then what you'll want to do is you'll actually want to make this, because we've still got a little properties here, you'll want to make this non-collidable and also not visible. Then you're going to clone this chap, scope out with L1 and circle. Oh, sorry, I didn't actually clone him, I just took it. You're going to clone, move the hand so that we're scoped into the other hand over here. And so now if I go preview invisibility, I'm not going to see anything. Oh, sorry, this chap must be invisible as well. Properties, not visible. So if it's invisible, we're not going to see anything. That's what it's going to be by default. But if we see it, it's going to be like, we're going to see like some cool flames coming out of the hands there. They do look quite like solid. So in the event that they're a bit too solid, you can always just, you know, increase the looseness, so that they're a bit more, they're a little bit more, you know, a little bit more ephemeral, as it were. Maybe a little bit more ethereal. Yeah, and you can mess with that sort of design as you please. Now, as for the flight itself, what we're going to do for that is we're going to put down a little keyframe. And in this keyframe, I'm going to give the character kind of, they're going to sort of stretch out their hands a bit. They're going to stretch out their hands. Maybe like a little bit of like a back tilt to the hand, you know, so it's like they're shooting themselves forward kind of a vibe. And I would say like maybe lift up a knee and the foot as well, just give it like a bit of a, give it a bit of that impression that they're like off the ground. Very cool. And you can also give their body a bit of like a forward tilt there, which will also make it quite cool. And now kind of, that's just the pose of them when they're flying. So we want to make it so that they go into this pose and they basically are flying for a certain amount of time. So the way that we can do that is, we'll put in a little timeline. And we will grab our little keyframe that we've got here. And let's say we want them to fly for like 1.5 seconds. So we'll get our keyframe and we'll make it a pretty long one. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Then we'll add an empty keyframe. And copy it and place another one at the end here. Add a blend. Whoopsie. L1 and right on the D-pad so we can get a bit of a closer look. Add a little blend. Add another little blend. And now our character will go woohoo! So it's not the smoothest animation ever, but it will do the trick. We'll also want to add in our little keyframe where we disable poses and we disable procedural animation. So we're going to behavior and we turn all these chaps off. And this one, which works just like the others, is going to be, I'll just give it a bit of the pink for no poses, or pink for no procedural, no proc, no poses. Fabulous. So there we will have our little flight. But not only that, we're also going to want to make it so that our flames become visible too. So what we're going to do for this is, we're going to go into this keyframe over here, and we're going to make it so that not only does it put us in this position, it's also going to make these flames visible. So if we turn off preview invisibility, or rather we turn on preview invisibility, it's going to go wah! And the flames are going to be there when we are in our position. So at the moment, let's just give this a quick key binding. Let's bind it to something like, circle for now. We'll also set the playback mode to once. So now if I press circle, whoosh, my character is gonna sort of do the pose. At the moment, unfortunately, circle is bound to the depossessed puppet, so I'm just gonna delete that quickly. So let's go woohoo, and we've got a little hover at the moment, a little jet propulsion at the minute, which is looking pretty cool. But of course, if I go off the edge, our character's gonna fall. So how do we turn this into an ability that actually allows us to fly? Well, what we're going to do for that is we're going to go into gadgets, then we're going to go movers and output, grab ourselves a mover, and then we're going to go damping specifics. Or first we're going to go movement strength 100%, but we're going to set forward speed to 0. Then overall damping 100%. Actually, movement strength doesn't really matter because this isn't going to be used to make us move. It's actually going to make us not move. So we're going to say damping in X is 0, damping in Z is 0, but damping in Y, in other words, the up-down movement, is going to be 100%. And what that means is it's going to prevent us from moving on the Y-axis. In other words, we won't be able to move up and down. So that way, it'll look like this. Swishing! So we float for a little bit there. Let me make like just another platform for us to go to. And then you'll be able to see what's cracking. You'll be able to see that hover effect. So, swing. So there we are. Let me do like a jump, whoosh, and then I can just do a bit of a hover. Swish. So that is how the hover itself works. It's pretty chilled, nothing too hectic there. Basically just the animations, the making these little dudes visible. But you might also want to make your character a bit faster. So once again, we can go to this keyframe, which is doing quite a bit. And we will increase our run speed and our walk speed. Just make them both like quite a bit faster. And if you want, you can name this keyframe, and it will be pose then it'll be fire visible, and it will be move speed. Sorry, move speed up. So generally, friends, you only really want one keyframe to do one thing, but in the event that you have a keyframe that does many things, just make sure that you name that keyframe very specifically. So this puts us in our pose. It also makes the fire visible, the fire by a hand, I mean, and it increases our move speed. So that is looking cool. So now if we do it, friends, it's going to not just be, okay, we're moving. Now we're going to be like, swoosh, there's a bit of speed there. If you feel like your movement is kind of controlled a little bit, it could be that damping in the direction that you're currently moving, or mover direction damping, you can make that naught as well. And then you should be freed up a little bit in terms of movement. I see what's going on here. So the character is moving a little bit funny, and that's because it's set to local space. So we want this to be Y, in relation to our character. Ha-cha-cha. So we'll make that point upwards, so that the Y is pointing upwards. And now hopefully that will make us, there we go. So now we can move freely as we desire, with no sort of stickiness. We have a bit of flight there, which is looking pretty cool. You can also, if you want, you can sort of change this pose around, separate the pose, the fire, and the move speed, and kind of just, you know, like add a little bit of movement as the character gets into their pose, you know, and like is shooting out the flames. You can have a lot of fun with this, friends. But another thing I want to show you is how to make yourself actually do like a bit of a jump with this. So not just hovering, but a jump itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy this timeline, but I'm going to make it so that when you do a double jump, you're going to sort of do like a bit of a flight upwards. So what we're going to do for that one is we'll actually use the puppet interface, because the puppet interface is great and it can actually tell us when we have jumped and when we have double jumped. So we're going to make it so that when we have double jumped, it's going to power this timeline over here. But this timeline is not going to have a mover that prevents us from moving on the y-axis, because of course we want to be moving upwards. Instead, what's going to happen is we're going to add a force applier into this chap over here. We'll turn off the grid snap quickly because we don't need that anymore. And this force applier will move us, and it will have movement strength or force strength 100%. And it'll be not ridiculously high. You'll want to experiment with this, but it's going to go directional. Then you'll put on your grid snap again, and you'll make it forward. And then you will go to precise move, and you'll try and get a bit of a 45-degree angle. It doesn't need to be perfect, of course, but just so that it's kind of like you're moving up and forward at the same time when you use your double jump. Okay, sweet. So that's looking pretty cool. And make sure that this force applier affects only friends. Otherwise, when you jump, all your enemies, and all the objects around you will be thrown into the air as well. And then, of course, make sure that when you go to your puppet, that their label is friend. Okay, sweet. So now when we double jump, we're going to do a little bit of a jump over here. So let's see how it works. Well, at the moment it doesn't work because my character doesn't actually have a double jump. So characters don't start off with a double jump at first, or their double jump is set at, the height is set at 0. So they actually want to increase this to something like 1. It can be anything really. If it's 0, they won't double jump, but if there is a value there, then they will be able to. So now let's try again. Woohoo! So there I just did a bit of a double jump, and when I do my double jump, I actually have a bit of flight there. So if you ask me, it's a little bit too much. I'm going really high, and I think I'm going to make it a little bit shorter. So it's kind of just like a bit of a quick boost of speed. So let us try this again. So it's all the same. I've just reduced the amount of force that is applied, and I've made it a little bit shorter. Let's go like this. Okay. So now, okay, cool. So that's not bad, but now maybe it's a little bit too weak. So let me increase the power of this force applier again. You see there's a lot of just finicking around, hey friends. I'm going to make it 7.5 again. So now we have a cool jump there. And we can actually chain them together. We can go jump and then hover. So that is looking pretty cool, friends, if you ask me. So we have our jump, which allows us to sort of like have a fire jump that increases our height. And then, of course, we have our hover. If you want if you want to be able to like freely fly around, then you can apply all this logic, friends. But if you want to have, as I say, sort of more free flight, I will recommend checking out my flight video, and then it'll show you how to like be flying up and down and all those various things. But yes, I think this is what we'll do for now. We'll have a bit of a glide, a bit of a hover, and then kind of like a fire double jump. But yes, friends, if you want to apply this to a proper Ozai flight, like in the fight against Aang, then definitely check out my flight video as well. Woohoo! Alrighty. And here we are, friends. So I hope I did all the firebend as well. Let me know if you enjoyed this video and if you want me to make more of this sort of a thing. We have our explosive fireball, we have our slash, we have our spin. Of course, we have our flight. Woohoo! Yeah! We've got flight. We've also got glide, which is looking fabulous. But yes, friends, let me know if you want me to make more videos like this. We've done the Earth ability collection. Now we've done the Fire ability collection. And yes, friends, let me know if you want me to do some more. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. I appreciate you. Thank you for checking this out. And I shall catch you on the flip-flop. Peace out! Hey, thanks for watching, friends. I just want to give a massive shout out to my Patreon patrons, or as I like to call them, the Mean Knights. Thank you so much, Tap Giles. Ooh, thanks so much, Tap Sensei. Whoop, whoop, whoop. And Salt Levels Max, my first patron. Ah, ye. Friends, if you want to support your boy and get access to some bonus content, consider becoming a patron. Thanks for watching, friends. Peace out.